Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a LEED Fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Cicchetti. Once a week, I get to interview a green building professional somewhere in the world. And today, coming to us from Maryland, here on the East Coast, U.S., we've got Fulya Kocak with us. She's the Senior VP of ESG Issues at Nareit. Fulya, how are you doing today?
Very well. Thank you so much for having me, Charlie.
Well, you're welcome. I can't wait to learn more about what you're up to because we will talk real estate, portfolio real estate, and ESG, but we've got to go back and learn how you got into sustainability. So take us way back, though. Where'd you grow up and go to school?
I grew up in Turkey. I'm originally from Turkey, and I studied architecture. And then I worked in Turkey for a few years, then came to America, Penn State for grad school. I had master's in architecture, and while I was doing my master's in architecture, I got very excited about the construction management program, ended up concurrently doing another master's degree in architectural engineering. And that is when I was introduced to sustainability. I was very, I'm going to call it luck. I was very lucky that my advisor, Professor Riley, was one of the very first, people that were involved in green buildings. And that was my introduction to lead green buildings and sustainability. And the year I'm talking about, I'm just going to give you some years. This was almost 20 years ago when things like LEED was not very well known or green buildings were not a hot topic.
Just getting started, and then later you've helped write textbooks about LEED. So tell us about that degree, though, architectural engineering. I hear that more and more. Can you give us a peek in? Maybe there's someone listening that's debating on even a degree like that. Can you choose your path? Do many go maybe architecture, many go engineering, or how has that prepared you? Can you tell us about that degree?
Architectural engineering, like many people that may be listening and not understanding how exactly it's different from architecture. When I joined Penn State in architecture, I did not know what architectural engineering was about. But when I found out that it's a mix of architecture and engineering, which is perfect, right? I mean, you can do all the creative work and then you have the engineering side, the technical side to it. And there are paths in it. When you're in the grad school, you can choose structure, you can choose construction, and you can choose the mechanical MEP side of the building. So it's really very much about building science. It's different from civil engineering, for example, because civil engineering has civil infrastructure involved. But architectural engineering has the building and its various aspects. So that's what was so exciting for me. It's a little more hands-on, not just design, but actual, for my option, which was construction, it was about construction and just taking the design and making it a reality. So that's why I wanted to do that one as well. And in 3 years, as crazy as it sounds, I finished both degrees and wrote 2 separate theses, which was quite some adventure.
That's a lot of work, but then it launched you into this career. So tell us about that in the kind of DC, Maryland area. You got into construction, right? You just said, hey, that degree kind of prepares you for construction. And maybe you did 10 or 12 years with a couple of big contractors in the area. Can you talk about that?
There's a story there. Let me go back to Penn State.
Sure.
Then I was in architectural engineering. USGBC visited our campus and they offered this pilot LEED workshop. It was a pilot for our school. It was the first pilot for a college. Again, this was a time when LEED was not very well known. And that was my introduction to LEED. Around that time, companies were visiting Penn State. And my first employer in the US was one of them. The reason I chose that company over others was that they came with their director of sustainable to the fair. And I got very excited that a company had this full-time person doing sustainability, and my studies were very aligned. That was the reason I accepted the offer. And I ended up getting into construction. Initially, it was interior fit outs. 1 year I did interior fit out. My heart was in base building construction. But here is the best thing that happened. Because I was involved with LEED early on, I took my LEED exam in 2003 and became a LEED AP. I was the second LEED AP in the organization at the time. The first one was Director of Sustainability. When I passed my exam, I remember that day, I came and I told my boss, I passed my LEED AP exam. I became a LEED AP. He said, congratulations, what's LEED? So this is 2000. I did not know that credential was going to open doors for me and put me where I am today. Being the second LEED AP, so 1 year into my career with this company, the base building group came to me and said, hey, you are assigned to a huge base building project, 2 buildings for the EPA in Crystal City. And you're assigned to it because you're the only LEED credentialed project manager. I was very excited. It was like 3 miles from my home on top of everything else. So everything was perfect. And the reason I was assigned to this very cool base building project with the LEED requirement was because of my credential at the time. So I'm happy because we have a head of sustainability. She's going to help me set this up. And 3-4 months into the project, the head of sustainability left. I was on my own. And they told me, okay, this is yours. And just on top of it, there is, I think at the time it was, I'm talking about almost 20 years ago, there's an $8 million penalty for not achieving LEED Silver, because this was a GSA building. And here is this, I'm in my second year as a project manager. All I did was I took an exam. I never implemented this. And there's an $8 million penalty. And I'm the only one who knows about LEED. So I was put in charge of a bunch of things, and LEED was on top of that. And throughout that project, I created tools, I educated subcontractors, our clients, our teams. I priced the project. I ended up running the commissioning because our MEP engineer left. So it was an incredible experience, yet very high stress. And the requirement was LEED Silver. And this is what happened, Charlie. I was like so worried about it. And we pushed it so hard. We ended up with LEED Gold. It became the first LEED Gold commercial property in the state of Virginia.
Wow.
At the end of this project, we have the press come in and we're doing the opening. The owner is just thanking all of the CEOs of the companies. And it's our company's turn. Instead of our CEO's name, the owner says, thank you to Fulya Kocak for helping us get LEED Gold. And that was like, oh my God, I'm still assistant project manager. It's like at the bottom of the list of people that can be listed. And that was a huge, huge part of my career in green buildings and then sustainability, then ESG eventually.
Well, yeah, we needed that background story. That's an amazing story. To everyone listening, see, you need to pass your LEED exam, and who knows where it could go. So construction and director of sustainability within these construction firms, and then went to the next one. And so tell us a little bit more about maybe the early career, maybe even coming out of college. You mentioned some mentors, that one professor, but is there anyone else you might consider a mentor along the way that maybe opened a door for you?
Well, I early on in life, in my career or even college, I had a misunderstanding that a mentor was someone who should be helping you consistently. And until I changed that definition for me, I didn't really have that mentor, that one person that helped me, that just kept talking to me and pushing me. When I changed that definition to it's anyone, even if it's a one sentence that they said to me that made a huge impact on my life, in my life, that is a mentor. And yes, I had those people. I had a number of them that are, sometimes it was a single lunch meeting. Sometimes it was a single sentence they said to me that made a huge difference in my life. So yes, I had mentors, multiple of them, but not in the way that most may think a mentor is.
Thank you for sharing that realization, right? Sometimes it's someone you might not meet. It's an author, an influencer. Sometimes it is someone that spends a little time with you or opens a door, but it doesn't have to be that we meet every week mentor, right? So thank you.
It definitely doesn't have to be that structured.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Okay, so construction, but at this time, you're also volunteering. You're getting involved locally with the USGBC more. So tell us about maybe the first part of your career. What kind of volunteering were you doing?
Well, at some point in my career, I was volunteering to 7 to 8 different organizations, a couple of positions and community positions, and had a young family. But I'll tell you this much. What I accomplished in my career was not a result of the jobs I held. And you may think that it is, but a lot of people, they have jobs and they do a great job. They perform well. But most of the things that I've accomplished in life that took me to that next level were about me doing things beyond my job. And volunteering is a part of it. My volunteering work with the USGBC and other organizations opened doors for me. It introduced me to people that I call friends today. This helped me create a network of people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. So when you have a job, it's great, but your network is just the clients, maybe your team. It's so much smaller than what you can have by volunteering your time. So that's really what happened to me, but I didn't know at the time. I was just thinking that I was just giving, not realizing that I was taking so much more. So that's my experience with volunteering. And one other story, again, I'm this young project manager, and I really wanted to be on the board of USGBC's local chapter. I applied, but at the time I wasn't really volunteering much. And of course, I was rejected. Do you know what happened? I did not give up. And I started to show up to events a little more and introduce myself a little more. Then I applied again in time. But applying, I also wanted to be the chair of that board eventually. So in my head, I just wanted to make that impact and get that experience of leadership. And yes, I was accepted. And in my 4th year, I became the chair of the chapter. That was an incredible experience. So I call this as experience where, again, you may think that it's just giving your time and effort, but I had a chance to be the leader, yet the risk was much lower than, like, let's say you're a CEO of a company. That's the kind of experience we're talking about. The scale may sound smaller, but it's about the existence of that organization. So it was a huge experience for me, but it happened because I set my mind to it and I kept trying and I kept doing it the right way eventually. And again, I gave not realizing what I would get in return, yet that was a very good experience in a leadership role at that level.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's so important to volunteer, give back to the industry. But look at what you've said is it's paid you back so much more, and it helps with the outside of the work skill set. So, all right. So I too wanted to leave construction and get into real estate. So what happened with you? How did you get into real estate?
So I was found, it wasn't something that I was planning to do.
Okay.
The story started with me in construction, and just let me just connect the dots a little bit because it will bring us here to today. In that first organization, I started as a project manager, boots on the ground, building projects. When the recession happened, there weren't that many base building projects, even interior fit out projects. And that's the time when the company decided to have specialization areas, and I was chosen to run with sustainability. So recession was the reason I was able to go full time and start a program for my organization. The second time I did this was another construction company. Little after the recession, they hired me not in a sustainability position, but in pre-construction because they thought that they didn't need that kind of full-time staff running with sustainability. That's a different story and we can get to it later. But I started another sustainability program for the second organization for a corporation that I had to go through the convincing period where it was not easy, yet it was a very valuable experience that you're taking an organization reluctant in having this and you convert the organization. And the third time around was when I was working for this organization and I created the corporate sustainability program and green building services. I was approached by a recruiter and the recruiter says, can we talk? I was thinking I can talk that way. I can make recommendations to give names. But the title was VP ESG issues. Our organization was called Nareit. So the call starts like this. Are you familiar with Nareit? I said, little, maybe. Can you tell me more about it? No, I'm not. I didn't even know what Nareit was. I knew what a REIT was because we had clients that were REITs, but I had no idea what Nareit was. And Nareit is the organization that represents real estate investment trusts and public listed companies with an interest in U.S. Real estate. So really what it means is it's a trade association for real estate companies that are called REITs based on a tax structure. So a REIT is called a REIT based on a tax structure. Let me quickly explain this as a side information. A REIT has to distribute 90% of its profits to its shareholders. They can keep 10%. So what that means is that the shareholders pay taxes on this distribution because the company does not keep it. Only 10% can be kept. Most REITs distribute 99% of their profits. So that's really the tax structure. The REIT is a REIT based on a tax structure. So I learned what Nareit was and what a REIT truly was. And then I said, what is ESG? Of course, I didn't say directly this. Okay, I'm somewhat familiar with ESG. Tell me more. So I just figured out that it's environmental social governance. And it took me a good 6 months after joining the company to fully understand what ESG meant. And ESG is really, some people may think it's sustainability. Some people may think it's corporate social responsibility. But ESG is a term used by investors that shows the environmental stewardship, social responsibility, and good governance practices that involves being transparent, being an ethical company, just taking all of those and making investment decisions based on companies' efforts around these three pillars. And this doesn't only include the good that they do, there's also risk involved, ESG risks such as climate risk or human resources related risks, supply chain risk, governance risks. So that's what ESG is. At the time, I didn't have a clue what that was. So talking about this, I got very excited because everything I've done in the past with 2 organizations and starting sustainability programs, I was going to be able to do a very similar thing for a whole industry. Very challenging, but very rewarding. So that's why I said yes to this position and joined Nareit almost 6.5 years ago.
Thanks for connecting the dots. Yeah, it's different, right? It's real estate, but it's these publicly traded, these real estate investment trusts here, and now with not just SEC changes, but just in general with GRESB and just the pressure on these portfolios. How do you govern? But also, what's your impact on the environment? So we're going to get to that in a minute. One more look back, just real quick. What are some of your proudest achievements?
My proudest achievements, there are a few. I will start with one that since day one, I always added educating others and sharing in my job description. And typically it never was in there. And my proudest achievement is that I touched thousands of lives through education, through conferences, events, and lately through LinkedIn Learning. I reached to 200,000 learners through LinkedIn Learning. And that to me, while holding a full-time job and having family responsibilities, I don't always speak up about these things. I like being humble, but I'll just say this. I am very proud, and I'm more proud when I hear from learners around the world that they are thanking me for teaching something complex in a very simple way. So that's what I'm most proud about. If I can share what I learned, if I can share my experience, and if I can grow with people that are learning from me, that is one of the best things about my job that I added this job description to.
Man, that's fantastic. LinkedIn Learning, I know you've got that link here on your bio, and you've also been a part of some of the lead AP BD plus C exam prep material. So just you've got the teaching side of you, I can tell you truly enjoy. Okay, so let's talk about present day. Give us a peek into, that 6 years ago, ESG was around, but it wasn't as mainstream as today, right? I mean, I would argue, right, most sustainability with our real estate and green buildings can roll up and fit under ESG. So give us a peek into some things you're working on today.
Throughout my days at Nareit, I've created a lot of guidance documents and publications. So I highly encourage your listeners, if they're interested in ESG, to check out our website, REIT.com. I typically work on some annual projects, such as an annual ESG report for the whole industry with plenty of case studies. I also work on an educational program called Jumpstart ESG Workshop. So right now I'm programming it. It's going to be at the end of January. It's open to not just Nareit members, but to anyone who'd like to register. So that's one thing I'm working on right now. And that excites me. And the second part of it, I haven't publicly announced this, but I am starting my own ESG advisory and education company. I resigned from Nareit. I'm going to be here for another 3.5 months until we find my replacement. But by the time this is live, hopefully we'll have a job description ready. So I'm very excited now that I can do a little more education, some more LinkedIn learning courses, some workshops. And also I would like to use my insights for strategic advice for just real estate companies and beyond. Could be investors and other startups who are trying to solve the problem, because we have a big need for solutions right now.
Yeah. No, thanks. Thanks for giving us a glimpse at what's next. And so let's say there's a portfolio, manager listening to this podcast, and maybe they're not already doing GRESB and CDP and a lot of the other opportunities, but where should they start with ESG? What advice do you give to some of your members?
I first tell them this is not pitching. I tell them to go to our website, and there are very good documents that can help start people, because I created one on ESG reporting frameworks that talk about the top ESG key performance indicators and discusses 10 different ESG frameworks, because it's an alphabet soup, very easy to get lost. And we have another one, a few of our members called it the ESG Bible for real estate. And that's almost like a reference guide going into detail of implementation and disclosure step by step. These are all free on our website. And again, I take pride in these documents. We worked very hard creating them. And then I would also encourage them to stay focused, because there's so much noise out there around ESG right now. And unfortunately, I hear some people that don't fully understand ESG, just talking about ESG as if they know it all. And you heard me say, it took me 6 months having a full-time job around ESG to figure it out. It is a very complex topic. And there is a lot under E, S, and G and overall ESG. So I'd say take it one step at a time. Don't get overwhelmed with the noise. And my LinkedIn Learning Introduction to ESG course, I try to keep it brief, but it's packed with information. It's a 44-minute long course, but I took a full day course and boiled it down to 44 minutes. So that's another one that's a good start. What I'll do, Charlie, is I'm going to when this goes live, I'll open up the course for free. I can do it for a few days and put it on my LinkedIn profile, so that if anyone is interested, they can go watch it around that time.
That's amazing. That's very generous of you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, okay. So we've talked about where to start with ESG. It's definitely a big deal with not just real estate, but any business, whether you're a one-person business or they're a very large business, right? You need to have some better answers here. I think so much of it's about transparency first. Here's what we're really good at. Here's what we're not great at, but we're going to improve. Here's how we're going to improve. You share. So let's talk about what's next. Let's say you had a crystal ball. What do you think's next in this kind of sustainability movement?
Actually, I don't even need a crystal ball for some aspects of it. They've been coming for a while, and they'll come fully. I'll start with climate change. Anytime you're talking about buildings as assets that can't move, the climate change risk is something that we all have to address as building owners or service providers to building owners or developers. So my crystal ball, though, says that it's going to just grow into beyond just reporting and identifying risks to finding solutions. Electrification is very challenging. Net zero is very challenging, costly in many ways, sometimes not feasible with tenants in place. So I expect that we'll see more need to solve these issues of decarbonization, climate change risk, identifying risks, but also being resilient. An existing building portfolio, not just new development. I think new development, we have a better chance of fixing the issues as we're building. But I'm talking about existing building stock that is not all Class A buildings. So we have a huge building stock that needs to be handled. And now it's seen as risk. When something is seen as risk, not a nice to have, investors start asking questions about these. if you're looking for funding, when you're getting a loan from a bank, you start getting questions. Insurance companies start being smart about this, and there may be issues around insurance. So when I look to the future, I see climate change affecting every aspect of not just a building, but a building-based business. So that's one. And then the social aspect, I think it's coming slowly, but from social justice to diversity, equity, and inclusion, asset level at the building level versus portfolio level and enterprise level, it's here, it's coming. That's another one that we need to stay focused on. And the third one I'm going to say is Scope 3 emissions. If you're not familiar with greenhouse gas emissions, for built environment, Scope 3 emissions include the big ones are tenant energy use, if you're the building owner, where the tenants are responsible of their energy use and payments, and embodied carbon, which is the carbon that's emitted from extraction to manufacturing of building materials. So these two are also coming fast at us. So that's what I see coming, Charlie, without a need for a crystal ball.
Don't need the crystal ball. That was great. Okay, I'm really enjoying getting to know you more here. You're a lead fellow. We forgot to mention that, so congratulations. Let's talk about some things to get to know you even more. What would you say is your specialty or gift?
Okay, so in the past, I thought this was coincidental, but it happened over and over and over again. I used to call it I was at the right place at the right time doing the right thing. With LEED, with ESG, with various different aspects of my life. But I think I had a good sense of, let's say, without a crystal ball, seeing the future a little better or anticipating what's to come. So that's just, I end up being at the right place, doing the right thing at the right time. And I see it as I'm not going to call it talent or anything, but as a gift that I have used in the past. And the second part of it is that I really appreciate my creative side, which comes from my architecture education. I learned to solve problems on day one when I started college, because that's really what we were educated to do, solve problems in a creative way, ask the right questions. And my construction experience on top of it is also based on solving problems instead of just talking about problems, because you have to get going. You're very time bound. That resulted in me being creative. So I even use that talent at home with my kids. We're very crafty family, and I paint rocks in my free time to relieve my stress. So yes, creativity is huge, and I encourage my children to do creative things that will help them in the future. Most people may say, hey, just work on your academics. But I tell my kids, create, keep creating. Doesn't matter what it looks like, because that's going to help you in the future as a professional or even in life when you're dealing with problems that you need to solve.
Well, these are great. Thank you so much. I love how you're teaching this to your kids too. It's amazing. Do you have any good habits or routines or rituals to help you stay on point?
Well, okay. My ritual, I have a twin sister in Turkey. She's a doctor in Turkey.
Oh, wow.
And I speak with her every morning. But the way we speak is not like, hey, what's up? It's more like looking back to the day we just had, looking forward to what's coming, talking about a strategy or whatever it is that we're dealing with. She became my morning person. Because of the time difference, it's early in the morning. And another ritual that I enjoy is my husband is also in construction, and he's in concrete-based construction. So he wakes up at 5 to go to work. I end up waking up at 5. It wasn't great at first, but we've been doing it for 4 years now. So I love grabbing a cup of coffee and just drinking it, being quiet and having some doing nothing time in the mornings.
Quiet time there before kids get up. That's great. It sounds like you get that personal coach, and I'm sure you help your sister too. That's just amazing. Optimize for the day. All right. So as we get to know each other better, I'm a fan of the bucket list. What are one or two things maybe on your bucket list?
I had one that I took care of sooner than I was thinking I could, authoring a book. So I authored 2 books. One is for LEED AP preparation that I thought I would be writing that in 3 months. Took me a whole year to write it, but thank God it's helpful to people. And the other one is called The Sustainability Leader, and you're really talking about my story to inspire others to do the same. So that was my bucket list one that I just checked off. However, I want to write another book. Hopefully, something else will be coming soon. The second one is doing a TED Talk. I'm looking for that idea to spread. The idea worth spreading. So we'll get there. I don't know when. And the next one is, I call this my retirement plan. My husband says that I'll never retire, and I call it retirement. But my retirement plan is to travel the world and speak and influence and help others. So that's my bucket list item that I'm so looking forward to.
Amazing. Is there anywhere in particular you really want to travel to, maybe travel and speak?
Not a specific place, but I would like to be immersed in culture as much as possible. There's no specific place, because I have learners around the world now that I want to be fair to them and just go wherever I can.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so is there a book or a podcast that you mentioned, TED Talk, a documentary? I don't know. Where do you go to learn? Is there a book or podcast or a talk or documentary you'd recommend to our listeners?
My book reading habits are a bit weird, Charlie. Sometimes I am reading 4 to 5 books all at once. It might be on personal development, on career, on real estate, ESG, whatever. And sometimes I'm not reading a single book for a month, maybe, or 2, depending on my brain space. But the books that I'll recommend in this episode are the ones that I read 20 years ago, and they made an impact on me, because I did not realize that I didn't know these things. So John C. Maxwell, he has 2 books on attitude. One is Attitude 101, and the other one is The Winning Attitude. Both of them the same topic. I can't remember which one hit me hard initially, but I ended up reading both of them. I learned from those books that attitude is everything. It's everything. And then there is another book that is a tough one to read because there's a lot of homework, but it's a great one that made an impact in my life. It's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And as cheesy as it may sound, again, 20 years ago, I read the book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think people everyone I talk to say, oh, I read it so long ago. If you haven't read it in a while, just pick it up again, because in what we do, it's not our technical knowledge that's the most important. People may think that you got to have it. It's a no-brainer, but it's the people. It's our relationship with the people that is the most important thing. At least that's what I've learned in my career and in my life. So that's another book that I read early in my career that helped me just change my ways, let's say.
Wow. We're going to list out all those books to our listeners here in our podcast show notes. Thanks. I'm a big fan of John Maxwell here in Atlanta, and I also love his 5 levels of leadership. I think that's a good one.
There's a lot of great books. Absolutely.
Yeah. Last couple of questions here. As you look back on your career, is there anything you wish you'd have known a little earlier? Any career advice you wish you'd have known a little earlier?
My whole career trajectory changed in 2009. That was when I had my first child. He was 2 years old. I was in construction and I had a baby, and times were tough because it was a very stressful job. And my baby was not sleeping and eating much, and it was very tough. Around that time, my sister visited me because she knew that I was having a very hard time with all of this. And around the time, she brought some of these books to me too. And that was a huge switch turning on for me, because I changed my, let's call it, the attitude and my efforts from paying attention to the hours I worked and the things I did to working smart and my relationship with people, my social side. Once I did that, a lot has changed in my life. I was working less hours, I was happier, and my career started to go really, really fast in the right direction. Although I was still growing a young family, things improved really fast after that. So I was having a very hard time because I was working very hard. I was exhausted, but it was because I was doing it the wrong way. And learning to pay attention to my attitude, learning to do my job a little differently, my social skills, developing them. I started to volunteer at that time. Most people were surprised that I had a young child and I was volunteering. So a lot of things changed when I changed my attitude and the way I work.
Wow. Thank you for giving us a peek in there, what you went through and how you persevered and look at you now and just so many others that you're influencing. All right. So last question. Let's say someone's listening to this podcast. They are getting excited hearing your story and maybe they're just now jumping into this green building movement. Do you have any words of encouragement for them?
This is a good time. If you haven't jumped already, this is a good time to jump and get started. But I'll tell you this one thing. Whichever area you are getting involved with, unless you take it seriously and you get that deep level expertise, just a little bit of everything is not going to cut it. I highly encourage specialization, even within the green buildings, because there are so many layers and layers of it. Of course, know the general information and basics and foundations. But I highly encourage specialization in any area, really. When you are specialized and there aren't that many like you, maybe it's commissioning of the envelope, maybe it is carbon emissions within the building, or maybe it is, who knows, it's maybe the controls and measurement and verification within a building. It could be a different area of a building, indoor air quality, healthy buildings. Specialization, in addition to the general knowledge, I think today is key because there's so much competition in this area. It's not like when I first started there, I was the only lead AP project manager that they could have chosen. Now it's probably half the company. So just specialize once you get into the foundations.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this has been encouraging for me. I hope it's been encouraging for our listeners. I want to wish you luck on this next chapter. Everybody connect with Fulya on LinkedIn. We're going to take a look at that class. So we'll make sure we link out to that. And just gosh, thank you for spending time with us today.
My pleasure. This was fun. Thanks, Charlie.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.